So, Alisdair, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic to finally have you on. We've been talking about this for, 12 months.
Yeah, maybe.
Pretty much every time I see you.
Yeah. I've been wanting to be here.
So I know you've been wanting to be here, and look, we've been wanting to get you on here, and obviously our two businesses are doing a few things together as well, which we'll come on to later. But why don't, for the sake of the audience and anyone who's listening on the podcast, why don't we just frame it up? Tell us exactly what Striver does and where your business has sort of come from.
Yeah, so Striver, we connect early stage careers with firms that are looking to employ the next generation of rock stars in their business. Make it simple for firms and simple for young people to find a really meaningful start to their career in a supportive and proper way. And so that's what we do. We're a double-sided marketplace.
Yep.
We have a technology platform that enables that. We've sort of evolved that, with a few iterations over about 2 years since we released that. And now, we're releasing another version of that, which is really kind of enterprise focus and supporting firms making good hiring decisions and young people making good decisions on their first career. Little bit of magic around some machine learning and some thinking around understanding our clients, and then hopefully we get delightful outcomes out of that. So that's what we're doing, and that's sort of we launched that version, the Striver version of this, in 2019 September, so just over 2 years ago. But like many things, and I don't know. I've listened to some of your podcasts and some of your guests, and a lot of other startups. We've got an 8-year history in this business. In 2013, we started this business under another business name. And I had a 10-year journey at a bank, 10-year career at a bank in banking and finance, and I loved that. And I left to go and set up a financial literacy program and work in the desert and in Indigenous workplace ready programs, and sold the house and gave back and went to the desert and ran out of money and then had to decide on how I was going to feed myself.
Is that where the name came from, Striver?
Well, yeah, like with the lineage of it, I guess. And so that was fun, and I loved it. Like, after 10 years in banking and finance, and I was, in a suit and tie. Now I was wearing, boots and a fishing rod to the desert to work with these sort of mining companies in their, workplace ready programs and helping raise financial literacy of the people that come into work for them. And that was really, really exciting. I loved that. And then I got into this business by just helping some businesses that I knew from my banking career finding great people. And it was a lifestyle business.
So tell me, what makes you quit banking and finance, sell your house, and were you married at this stage?
No.
Okay, that makes sense. And go and live in the desert, because that would never have happened if you were married. That would have been shut down pretty quickly. But what makes anyone, right, give up a career in what is a very lucrative, particularly it's very much a time-based career. The longer you spend in it, the more you earn, right? Yeah. To go and hang out in the desert. What drove that?
It's interesting because I tell the story a bit, and especially to this next gen that we're working with. I think that you either become a 40-year bitter and twisted banker, or you sort of at 10 years you have this itch. Well, I didn't even make 10 years; it was 9.5 years, and you want to go out and make a difference to the world. And I really wanted to have an impact, and I wanted to leave a footprint, and I wanted to make a difference. And I loved the bank. Right, I never actually even wanted to leave. Like when I resigned, I remember my boss saying, well, what can we do to keep you? I wasn't going to a competitor. I never even looked at a competitor. I loved the organisation I was in. I loved everything that we did, but I just really wanted to be able to leave a footprint, right? And be able to look back and go, I did that. And that was hard to do in a bank because we were just part of such a behemoth. And it was a really amazing career, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it, but I really wanted to make a difference. And so I leaped off this cliff and went to do the social enterprise, which was fantastic, but it was probably more social than enterprising, which was great. But I was really happy that I did that because I learned and I connected and I understood a lot about what it meant to leave a footprint, and that was really important.
How long were you out there?
Well, I didn't live in the desert. I commuted to the desert, so I kind of would do over about 18 months, I would go, sometimes I was going every week. I would fly into Perth, and then I'd fly to Perth to Karratha, and then I would go from Karratha to Roebourne, and some people will know these names, across the South Headland, and then I'd fly back, and that would be, and back to Perth, and then back to Sydney, and I would do that, and then I'd have 4 or 5 days in Sydney, and I'd go and do it again.
Right.
So I was commuting to the hardest place in Australia to get to, but it was great, you know, and you know, my use of planes and things like that was all really interesting, and I was free, and you know, I wasn't working 9 to 5. Not that I ever worked 9 to 5 at the bank, but it was just different being out, and it kind of like, you know, meant that I could do things that every day meant something and made a difference, and I could say that was what we did there, and that was really, really rewarding, not financially rewarding, but really, really rewarding personally. And it was something, I remember one of my bosses around that period said, you know, when you're 94 years old and you're sitting on the park bench looking back in your life, will you regret not doing that? And I said yes, and he said, do it.
Fair enough. That's a good look. A lot of people have said that to a lot of people, and I think it's always a good question to ask.
Great one.
Absolutely. So then, okay, so you've worked at a bank, you've gone out and, you know, educated people out in the desert. How then do you end up deciding, you know, right, I'm going to build a business that's going to help young people, which is a problem, and it's actually grown significantly in the last 4 or 5 years. I've noticed. I'm going to help young people get a job, and I find it ironic in this country in that the employment rate is so low. And there's, you know, having been in recruitment for 20 odd years here, there's always so many jobs. You know, even during the downturns, there's always been plenty of jobs, but it's always been exceptionally difficult and has gotten harder and harder and harder for graduates and younger people to get jobs. But how did you sort of come to that conclusion, and what made you go and want to do something about that?
Well, it was, and you know, I probably didn't sit there at the time like a lot of founders and go, what's the problem and how are we going to make an impact?
I don't think that many founders actually do that. That's a myth.
Yeah. I mean, the textbooks will say that's what you do. But, you know, like it is kind of, you know, where's the problem? How can I solve it? How do I prolong something bad happening? Like all that sort of stuff. But I think what happened was it was just, I starved myself into it, right?
Yep.
I had this network from banking and finance, which was fantastic. And, you know, if I'm ever going to give anyone advice, is like those networks in your early career and listening to your other podcasts, they're the ones that, you know, they make you later on, or they support you later on, or they're your foundation later on. And when I first got my job, I had a marketing degree and I was washing cars at Volvo, and no one would give me a job. And so I had to hustle and hack and do everything I possibly could to get my first job in finance. And then I had a really good career. So I didn't want anybody to have to go through all those lessons I learned. I did well at them, but like I looked back and thought, like, man, that was if I knew then what I knew now, I wouldn't be able to do it. So let me take that lesson and I'll show that.
Yep.
And so then also I was working with a bunch of these, you know, firms that were self-employed firms that were quite often really successful bankers that were now running a business, and they had no idea how to find people or hire people or manage people or anything. So there was this kind of, this was my journey and what my experience was, and these are the firms that come to me for advice back when I was banking. And so I said, oh, well, let me help you. And they would come to me and say, how do you find great talent?
Yep.
And we said we never really did it well in the bank. So I said, well, let's go and solve that problem. And so there was a demand for it, and there was young people going, you know, like imagine going through, you know, applying for 4 consulting firms, 4 banks, 4 everything with, you know, 100,000 other kids applying for it. It's just a brutal process for the young people.
It is brutal.
And I wanted to make that easier and make it meaningful and connect these great businesses I work with great young people that didn't want to be washing cars at Volvo.
Fair enough.
Although I enjoyed that.
I started out washing cars. It's a good way to start. I was probably 14, but yeah.
Actually, no, I didn't love it. It was about 2 or 3 weeks into it. I said, I have a marketing degree and I'm washing cars at Volvo. This is not how it was supposed to unfold.
Hey, I wash cars in the UK. I tell you, that's a lot less fun than washing cars in this country. Yeah. All right, so explain to everyone, you know, obviously you've said that you help young people find jobs. Explain to me how it works. And probably, you know, as you mentioned, the business has been around 8 years. It's been in its latest iteration for 2 years. So where did it start, and what were you doing initially, and how did you end up, you know, I know the story, but let's tell everyone, how did you end up where we are today?
Yeah, so there were a bunch of people that I knew, that some of them were friends who said, we want to find people. I went out and found them at universities, knocked on doors of academics and deans and said, can we help your finance students get jobs in financial services firms? They said yes.
You just did finance at the beginning, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of been our lineage, and we've obviously you know, broadening that out now, but it was all finance focused, and we had a couple of iterations where we went broader and we came back until we kind of were happy and comfortable going to other verticals. But so that's what we did, and then I was charging fees, and as I said, like I was, you know, had not a worry in the world, or no house, but I had, I was feeding myself and I was making some fees. And, my partner at the time, who's now my wife, we were tootling off to Europe for 3 months of 3-month chunks and coming back and then doing some events and
dreadful.
Placing some students and making some money, going back and doing that. And I wasn't really too worried about anything really. And I had this friend who were quite along the way, and we were talking about business and more like, just someone that would you bounce off. And he was he had a tech background, and he was in my ear saying, like, when are you going to turn this lifestyle business into a real business? And I was like, I quite like the Greek islands, 3 months of the year, thank you very much, leave me alone. And then there was this perfect storm in financial services in 2018 or 2017 to 2019 with the Banking Royal Commission, and there were education standards that were coming across, and there was this mass exodus from the profession and the industry, and there was this kind of all this sort of noise, and I thought, well, if I'm ever going to do anything, I'm going to do it now. There was just kind of, one of those things that all these sort of things lined up. And so we went out to that network that we had and we raised some money and we said, right, we're going to digitize this experience and we're going to scale it, and we're going to give back to the community that we serve, and we're going to make sure that this profession and the broader industry around it is going to have young people aspiring to be here, and we're going to lock out the sustainability. That was the pitch to the investors. So we've got a bunch of investors, and we've got sort of 13, 14, I don't know if we'll talk about that, but early investors that came in and said, look, we want to back you, and then we redesigned it, we relaunched it, we rebranded it as a digital sort of tech platform, talent tech or HR tech or whatever you want to call it, and that's sort of the journey.
Yep. And so, how do these students find you, or do you find them? And how does that sort of, and how does that work? I said
it's the biggest focus, especially for the next 12 months as well, especially given this current perfect storm of talent shortage globally, as our sort of 50% of everything that we do in the business is acquiring, attracting and talking and speaking to and resonating with this next gen.
Yep.
And the good thing is every year there's another group. There's obviously challenges in the education sector at the moment with universities and numbers and so forth. But so, we have obviously a digital footprint. The last 12, 18 months has been hard to have a physical footprint in classes. But the funny thing is I can also at the click of a hat be in a lecture in Perth that we never normally could do. So we'll do face-to-face presentations in universities, in classes, with careers hubs, with university societies. Our digital footprint, our media's sort of really doubled down on that. We're sort of branding our messaging and support to the community in the next year. We partner with companies like MyOb and Colonial First State and IOOF and Zurich that kind of help us bring brands to the universities that will help us raise awareness of young people, so we do lots and lots of different things. It's 50% of the business is getting in front of young people to say, hey, we are a solution for you if you want to find or navigate your way through this finding your first job. Yeah,
and it's almost like the old school graduate fairs, but you're doing it in a modern way.
Yeah, and because it's a really interesting question, because everybody's like, well, are you at careers fairs and
do they still have those?
Yeah, and so we're gonna play with that next year. Like I've always been anti having a fondue fountain at an O Day, right? Although a fondue fountain at an O Day is pretty cool. But there's 38 universities around the country, and are they the people that you want, and so forth. And the big organisations, the big four consulting firms, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars doing that stuff every year. And do they actually need it? Because their brand is what people aspire to be a part of anyway. So there's a question of that. But yeah, those virtual career fairs, internships are a real thing.
They are paid now as well, far more paid than they ever used to be.
Yeah, and so they should be. Like I'm a really big fan of everyone getting paid. I don't like the unpaid internship, and there's a real problem with that. We need another podcast.
Let's not get into that. We won't get into that one.
But young people getting in earlier, and like we had a great conversation with a client yesterday about saying, why aren't we getting first year students in and giving them project work, paying them for it? If they're doing a full-time degree, which in business and finance is only 12 hours contact, but the engineering's a bit more. If they're pulling beers at the RSL on the weekend, they're doing a 2 or 3 days paid internship in a firm, they're doing their university degree, and they're playing in their local sporting team. Like that is the good that is setting those people up to make sure that their university education, their work experience, and everything comes together to make them about as employable as they possibly can.
Yep. I would agree with
that's
that.
the future.
Well-rounded human beings, hopefully.
Sure.
So let's talk about, we obviously met because you were hiring, I think, and you spoke with Dana, but you and I have spoken a lot because you're now moving a little bit into the tech space.
Yeah.
Which obviously we do. We don't do a lot in finance. We do a little bit, but mainly tech.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating space because, as you mentioned, there is a global shortage, but there's also, from our experience, a real unwillingness to hire people with less than about 3 or 4 years experience. And yet there's no one to hire with 3 or 4 years experience because everyone's hiring them. And yet there's still an unwillingness. So I know you and I are still coming up with some ideas as to how we can solve that problem. But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you've been doing some unique things with them in terms of, I came and sat in for a day with you guys when you were doing an assessment day and a testing day with them, and you had some really interesting people there. It was a really good experience. But what do you think we can do about that? Because it's a massive, massive problem, this unwillingness to try people who have no experience. And yet there's such a shortage. It doesn't make sense to me. It's the same why there's an unwillingness to hire people over 50, and yet there's a shortage. I don't understand why companies are so unwilling. What's your experience?
Well, and that's a whole other thing we haven't spoken about yet, that 50 plus return.
We'll come to that next year.
Yeah, let's do that in another podcast.
It's Christmas time. We'll talk about that.
But yeah, look, and like we've carved a business out of grow your own, right? And so, and funnily enough, in financial services, it's like we don't really want people to come with bad habits. We'd rather, that's part of the value proposition. Let's train them our way. But the interesting thing about working with the engineering students is they come with their own portfolio on GitHub. They tend to work harder and longer and have side hustles and be involved in their own sort of startups. And like, imagine if any student we were working with that had any of that experience in finance, would be fantastic, right? So I think I just think you sort of get over that and look at the strengths that they can bring into. Probably the lacking thing that they have is their ability to work in teams and things like that. That sort of comes with
the experience of doing that. You mean?
But we were running assessment centres with our lead engineer, and he'd walk out of them and go, "These guys are great. Like, I'd give any one of them a job because they got side hustles, they've got their portfolio. We can see the code that they've written, how they apply themselves, and also what I found was these ones they would be doing I don't know what the contact hours, 28 hours a week in an engineering degree, plus they'd be doing certain amount of free coding and stuff at night time, and doing a side hustle and working a part-time job. Like, the work ethic of the engineering students is phenomenal. And so I think businesses that are prepared to look through the lack of kind of team experience, I think that's probably the gap, and look at the actual technical capabilities of some of these university grads, I think will be beneficiaries of it. And growing your own, you can take somebody into your firm, into your organisation that's had 3 years experience, and hopefully they'll hit the ground running. But they might bring some bad habits, and they might not click, and they might not fit, and they're more expensive, and you'll have higher expectations of the outcome. But if you've actually put together a pathway to growing someone, who might be in their final year of university or their penultimate year at university, you give them some project work, you give them some assignments, you assess and you view how they engage with that, and you interact and you take them on a journey, and you're going to breed loyal people. I think you are too. I think most of these companies seem to worry they're just going to train them and lose them. But I don't necessarily think that's... I think COVID's also probably changed the way people view their employees a little bit. But I think there will breed loyalty. Tell me, have you seen an increase in creative and technology coming? I mean, obviously there is an increase in that in terms of designers, game designers, UX, all that kind of stuff. Are you seeing a trend of that in the students that you're seeing? Because I read a lot about that. We're getting a lot more roles that are less traditional, just back-end coders, and far more designers and creative people who are using now technology, because technology is taking everything over. And it's a really interesting merge of skill sets, because traditionally creative people and engineering people would not necessarily get on easily, and yet those two areas have really come together a lot in the last couple of years. Well, I think the world just expects delightful experiences, right? Like I remember Glenn, our engineer, talking about it and saying, my grandmother expects Facebook-esque experiences in everything that she does, because that's just what we've become accustomed to. So the design is meeting the technology everywhere at the moment, and without sort of, you know, really good creative and really good UX, then your kind of product is not adopted, right?
Well, Apple helped as well. I mean, Facebook, it's interesting you mentioned Facebook. Who was it yesterday? Someone said to me, I was talking to a founder, there's another new social network platform coming out, you'll be pleased to know, because we need another one, which is actually very designed, it's just for business owners, which is quite interesting. I actually quite like the concept, and they're going to be launching that next year. But we were talking about social networking and how it really is so dominant. And, you know, if you are actually on your phone, the only thing that's really a good experience is social media. Like, you can look at your emails on there, but it's not a great experience. And you can look at websites on there and it's not a great experience. But social media, people will literally, that's what they do 90% on their phone, and they're on their phone so much. But they said to me, Facebook's very much for old people. It's funny because you just said your grandmother. Yeah. So it made me laugh. It made me laugh. But you're right, the expectation there, right? The expectation is much higher. And it's not called Facebook anymore. What's it called?
No, it is Facebook. The parent company is called Meta.
That's right.
But see, I mean, you were talking about your car, right? And that's, you know, you've got this car that's as fast as anything, and it's beautiful and turns heads, and you love it, and it's got everything on it, except your experience in it is the thing that's making you go, oh, I'm not sure.
Inside, yeah. We won't say what car it is.
No.
Get upset.
No. But that's it's all about the UX, right? Everything from the car you drive to the app that you do to the your experience checking out at Woolworths, and so that is, I think, and young people are really in tune with that, I think, and so that's where you're getting more creative coming into the traditional coding, and I think that every engineer or coming through should be thinking about how the customer's engaging with that, and so you'll get more of that.
So, one thing we haven't touched on, you know, we've talked about your journey to where you are. Always like to ask this: what's been the hardest thing? Where did it go wrong? You obviously have changed the name at some point. You've reiterated it. Was there something that wasn't going according to plan, or what's been the hardest thing over the last few years of Striver? Yeah, no, and I thought you might ask a question along the hardest things, and I think like we named it. We had a chance to sort of rebrand and everything when we sort of took some money on board and turned it digital. So Striver just meant that it allowed us to be more about the feeling that you get and the people that we attract than what we used to call it. And so that was the reason behind that, and just took the right opportunity. But you know, we've had building this latest version, we built it for one specific client set, and, you know, we tested that and tried that, and there wasn't quite the market fit, and then the market fit kind of settled inside a client set that we were already working with, and we didn't notice that. So that's not a failure, or that's not a hard thing. It's all part of the process. And we had another experience last year, early this year, late last year, where we had a client in Singapore, and we were all gun-ho, and it was all going to work, and we actually approached it in the wrong order. There's a business process that was the problem, not anything with the tech. But and so we learnt from that we need to this is the order that we invest in the business, and we do it. There's 3 steps, and we follow those steps because that's the way that it works. And if we go out of that line, it makes sense. So all of those things they're hard and they're kind of disappointing at the time. And before you worked out that you've got it wrong, you're feeling really uncomfortable in that situation, and you're going, where is it? And then you got this aha moment, and then you find that fit, and away you go. So those are the hard bits, I guess. The other thing that's hard is, you've got team, you've got clients, you've got shareholders, you've got many, many stakeholders and so forth, and that's kind of always tough, but it's also, part of the most rewarding part of it, So, lots of sort of tough things and hard things, but nothing that kind of doesn't, you don't learn from, and you can't. They're just problems that you sort of go, right, okay, what's that problem? Let's get into it and solve that one. The marketplaces are difficult because you've got a double-sided customer, just like we do and what we do, but then you've also got investors as well. So you're just ramping up the amount of people you need to make happy. So I guess that's anything, I think, in human capital or people is difficult because people are unpredictable, right? And you just don't know what they're going to do. Well, that was that. Like, I was listening to one of your podcasts about car buying, and I'm like, okay, so what's the similarities here? And there's none in the market, but then the car doesn't say no. No.
Like, whoever's going to put the money on the table to buy the car gets the car. Really?
Yep.
The car doesn't say, oh, actually, you're not ticking my boxes, I'm going to go elsewhere. So, yeah, you're exactly right. You've got way more moving parts in this exercise. And that's why, you know, traditionally this stuff's really hard to get technology integrated into it to scale it, because ultimately human beings, you know, have decisions and so forth.
So you might not be able to think of this off the cuff, but I'm going to ask anyway. What's the funniest or most ridiculous thing that has happened in terms of putting a person together with a client? You know, I know, having been in recruitment for over 20 years, I one day will write a book about all the ridiculous things that I have seen over that time. I mean, it's a long time, and I think a lot of people wouldn't believe that book. But is there anything that's particularly happened? You know, graduates are probably a little bit more liable than people who are a little bit more mature. But is there anything where you've just gone, I can't believe that actually happened?
Oh, you know what? As you're asking me that question, I'm going, there is lots, and I'm just trying. Because, you know, we're as a team, like it's a really interesting thing with young people, is that as you get older, they stay the same age, and you kind of, there's distance, and you kind of go, I don't want to be like my father and things like that. But, you know, we have clients that are, you know, are probably older than me, and then candidates that are younger, that are, you know, are 20.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's differences in the way, you know, the last 2 years has been really interesting for them. They, you know, they have different sorts of problems, and they have different sorts of feelings, and they have different sorts of anxieties and worries and media and all this sort of impact on them. So I guess just things like, you know, like resilience things, and I'm just trying to think of something funny though, but
I can't imagine what it would have been like to have been 20, 21, 22, going through what we've obviously been through with lockdowns and all the bizarre. I mean, my children are much younger, so it's different. They're living in a family home. But if you're out and you're living in a shared home, or living on your own, or even living with a newish girlfriend, imagine if you just moved in and then you got locked down for 6 months. That's a pretty intense experience. They would have been through a very different time. And then you mix in trying to get a job into that crazy world. It would be an odd time.
You know what? Where it kind of clicked to me was obviously more recently, is that we had candidates say that they've never had an on-campus university experience.
That's insane.
So
none.
So you have this thing, and you would have seen this for like 18 months ago, businesses were going, oh, we've given up our lease, we're 100% virtual, isn't it great? Everyone's want to come and work for us. Now we have university students that have been in their mum's lounge room for 2 years, and then the business says, oh, we're 100% virtual. What's, I have to start my career in my mum's lounge room? We're going to the office. No, if you can't give me an office, I'm not going.
Yeah.
So that's sort of an interesting one. So I think they're all really interesting, maybe not funny, but really interesting, and I would not have picked them. I would just not have picked that being an issue.
I remember being excited to go to work when I started working, going to an office every day. I was in London, getting on the tube, and 100%. You know, even in those days, putting a tie on. But just having that, it was a new experience, right?
Social.
It was a completely new experience. It was social. It was exciting time. So I guess if you're just told, no, you're still staying at your parents' house, you're not coming anywhere, I would be disappointed. I'd not actually thought, because we don't do a lot of recruitment, although we will talk about that again, but because we will be doing that. But we haven't done a lot of recruitment at that very early stage. I guess that's an interesting, I hadn't thought about that. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah. And we were like, oh, okay. Because, as I said, like 18 months ago, I would have thought, oh, that's going to be really attractive to young people. They're going to go surfing in Byron Bay, and they're going to be doing their remote work, and then they're like, nah, get me around people.
Yeah.
Because I went through high school to go to university and have this amazing experience at university, and that's been taken away from me.
And they want the free food when you're that age, right? You want the free food.
No,
the kitchens. That's what you want.
You want Friday beers.
Exactly, you do.
Like, you do. You know, and that's where the social life. We had 2 interns, and I said, oh, you know, when we can come back to the city, and they're like, oh, I can't wait to wear my, you know, this dress that I bought, you know, to go to the office, which it's been hanging there, and they haven't been able to use it. That's all that stuff that's really, really interesting and kind of people stuff.
I don't think anyone's actually sort of talked about that, how you know, it is exciting, and to not have that would be missing it. They've missed out on a lot of things. I know even our kids, you know, graduating year 6 and things, they missed out on things. Graduating uni, missed out on things. Year 12, gosh, there's so many.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they're the formative social years, and it's really hard for us to sit there and, you know, when you don't have a life and you don't go out and you've got kids my age, like 2 and 4 and so forth, it doesn't really matter.
Oh, you're
But
2 and 4? Gosh, you're never going out again.
But I've sat there and looked back at with my wife and go, like, we used to go out and have a hoot, and they were really, really important times in the development of everybody, right? So that's all taken away, and that's going to have ramifications in the employment market as well. So that's all. They're all really interesting little things that we're dealing with at the moment, which are funny and interesting, but and not expected.
No. So what's the future? You know, we talk about this. We talk about these things that a lot of people aren't thinking about. What is the future of Striver? You've sort of really nailed that finance piece. You're moving into the tech space, as we talked about. The platform is evolving.
Yeah.
You know, where do you see the future of Striver right now?
Yeah. So we've really sort of about to release our enterprise version, and so we've done a lot of work around the market fit of that. We've got early adopters. We've got a couple of bigger clients that are sort of committed to that, and so you know, we're going to spend the next 6 months really nailing the integration and the you know, the experience with the firms, and then that allows us to kind of broaden across other disciplines. And so, you know, the other interesting thing is that we work with fintech firms that have finance needs, and then they have marketing needs, and they have engineering needs. And so what we find these days is the businesses, and we have finance firms that want engineers.
Yes.
Because they have tech stack, they have, you know, marketing needs, they have all these other things. So we're really trying to build it out that, you know, we meet the client where they are, what the need is. They might say we're a fintech firm, but we have needs in finance, marketing, and engineering. And then also with the candidates, they might say, look, you know, I'm an engineering student, but I really want to get into investment banking, or I'm an investment banking student, but I really want to, you know, I want to bring my analytics to tech. And so really, and I think that's a really beautiful thing, and you know, thinking about what the jobs of the future are, and when you take away those channels which you need a certain education for, businesses that think diversely about the type of people that they employ from different backgrounds and different disciplines in education, I think really create richness in the businesses. So working with businesses to understand what their needs are, and then broadening out that set to candidates to say, hey, okay, it's not just big four consulting firms. There is a whole new world out there, and let's explore that. And bringing that together ultimately is the end goal for us. And
I think you're right. I think kids and students and young adults are far more attuned to not necessarily looking at just the big four. You know, they do want to see those. And finance and tech have really come together. And finance is going through massive change. Obviously, you know, Afterpay has changed it in terms of credit cards that are on their way out, and this buy now, pay later is on its way in. Crypto's coming in. It's huge changes going on. We're seeing a greater demand, or I'm certainly seeing greater demand in founders wanting less tech people and more finance people, which I never thought would happen, right? But it is happening. So it's interesting. All right. So let's say I'm a student out there watching this, and we have quite a big student audience, because I've done a few talks with that sort of audience, and more and more recently, because they're very interested in entrepreneurship, and obviously with all the stuff we do about founders, we get asked quite a lot. So for all the students out there, or people who've just finished university in you know, the last year or so, why would they want to come and talk to you, and how do they come and talk to you as a business?
Striver.careers, we're on all the socials. That's how you find us. But what we do is we get to know you. We meet you at where you're at, what you're looking for, and understand you. We do a lot of coaching and supporting around how to, you know, pitch yourself in an interview and so forth. And like, that was kind of that you know, my story of being at you know, washing cars and stuff. What I worked out pretty quickly was how to get in front of people and get myself a job the old-fashioned way, right? So, you know, helping people, you know, once we're in front of someone, how do we actually get the job? And so supporting young people on positioning themselves to do that, that's kind of our wheelhouse, and that's the value that we get. We'll ultimately get them a job, and that's fantastic. But what we want to do is make sure that every experience that any young person has coming through the Striver experience, that it turns out to be a better outcome for them next time they apply for, or interview for, or do a psychometric for, or do an assessment for, or do a hacker rank for, or whatever it is. We want to make sure that we leave them in a better situation than they came to us in, and that's what we're there for. We're all about feedback and making sure that they nail the next time that they're in a position that they have to compete.
Awesome. Awesome. Look, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm glad we got you on. Look, I think what you're doing is great. I think it's very needed, and I really do think that they have been a very neglected part of the economy for a very long time, and it's good to see that there are people out there trying to help them, essentially, because like you said, their experience is severely lacking in the world because of the last couple of years. So they need all the help they can get.
So they are consumers and they know about it.
They are consumers, and they think very differently, and I think everyone needs to understand that, but they've got a hell of a lot to offer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's been great.
Steve.
Finally got you on.
Thanks, mate.
You won't ask me. I don't know what we're going to talk about next time I see you.
Oh, well,
you saw was the first thing you asked me.
We'll work it out. We'll talk about the 50 pluses.
Thanks for coming on the show, and good luck with it all.
No worries. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks,